The Appalachian Hills never cease to give us more legends and stories to explore. I guess there's a reason that it's my favorite place to visit, both in my research here as well as physically. If I had only known about today's legend before my last visit to Chattanooga. Then again, maybe not, as we'll uncover as the story goes. I don't know. Who's to say? It's easy to say one thing while sitting here in the safety of my home, reading through account after account. But when the rubber meets the road and excitement grows, yeah, I'd probably do something stupid, then later regret it. Traveling down a lonely rural road in the Appalachian Hills, looking for something that no one knows what it is, then hearing the sound, Pitty Pat, Pitty Pat, coming up behind you, is sure to send a chill up your spine. No one knows for sure what it is, some sort of cryptid, or a darker supernatural entity. Reports exist that lend credence to it being either one. Whatever it is, it's said to have been in those hills for over 100 years, and is still there, even today. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. The small community of Sail Creek sits in the southeastern portion of Tennessee, between Chattanooga and Dayton. With a population of barely 3,000, there isn't much to the community. But by all accounts, Sail Creek has one of the most haunted roads in Tennessee. Shipley Hollow Road has had legends swirling about it for over 150 years. Shipley Hollow Road is only about 1.5 miles long, connecting Dougherty Ferry Road to Providence Road, cutting a lot of time off of commutes in the area. But most locals don't care. They have no issue with staying away from Shipley Hollow Road and taking a much longer route. In fact, they go out of their way to avoid Shipley Hollow Road altogether, a road they call Pitty Pat Hollow. The local nickname Pitty Pat Hollow comes from what dwells in that area, something locals call Pitty Pat. What Pitty Pat is, though, well, no one is quite sure. There isn't even much of a description of the thing. Based on accounts, it's either some sort of mysterious creature or a shadow figure, a dark paranormal entity that, when it appears, is visibly dark, darker than the dark in which it stalks. Tales of Pitty Pat goes back to at least the 1860s. Most everyone in the area agrees that what appears to be the original story took place at a hairpin curve in the road. A horse-drawn carriage was traveling down the road in the early evening with a handful of passengers, including a mother and her infant child. Some unseen force or creature spooked the horse, causing it to take off in a panic. In the curve of the road, the carriage was overturned, spilling its occupants onto the roadside. It was then that whatever had scared the horse revealed itself. The thing rushed the shocked group, then ran off into the woods with the infant child. The baby was never seen again. Another late 1800s account was recorded by steamboat captain Samuel Elsey. He was returning home one evening after work aboard his ship, and to make up some time since it had gotten dark, he decided to take a shortcut down Shipley Hollow Road. Just around 100 yards past then McDonnell Mill, where the original attack had happened, Elsey heard the sound of something rushing up behind him on the road, although he couldn't see anything. He rushed his horse onward, but the sound kept pace with him, forcing him to take refuge at the first house he came to. He pounded on the door until it was answered, telling the owner, in no uncertain terms, that he was staying there for the night, no matter what. Stories started to pile up in the Sail Creek community of similar experiences, people being chased through the dark on Shipley Hollow Road, and all of the stories that involved sightings always reported the thing as a, quote, shadowy creature. Speculation began on whether the thing was some sort of mysterious creature or a good old haint, the Appalachian equivalent of a ghost. But no matter which side of the argument locals of the time fell on, the description was always the same. It was a dark, shadowy thing. Stories and sightings continued on into the 1900s, and common points in the story started to present themselves. The thing always stalked its victims, only in the vicinity of Shipley Hollow Road, and it was always heard first. People described hearing the stalking footfalls first, a pitty pat, through the dark woods, before making its way onto the road behind them. The distinctive sound giving the thing its name, Pitty Pat, as well as the secluded area being referred to as Pitty Pat Hollow. Other accounts began including Pitty Pat itself dropping from trees onto the back of horses, causing the horses to buck and stampede to shake off their attacker. Sometimes the horse was part of a team being driven down the road. Other times it was a single horse with a rider on its back. It didn't seem to matter to Pitty Pat much. It would attack either way, rider or not. These attack stories became more and more abundant. Traveling outsiders, locals, doctors, even sheriffs, Pitty Pat didn't seem to care, making the accounts more and more believable in the locals' minds. In weeding through all the different accounts, it doesn't seem that Pitty Pat is the only thing haunting the area of Shipley Hollow Road. There are stories of a woman in white being seen out the corner of travelers' eyes, only to disappear when they turn their head to see who or what the apparition is. Similarly, there are a few reports of carriage drivers catching the glimpse of a headless body riding in the wagon beside them, again, only to disappear when they turn their attention to the spirit. How these other sightings correlate to the legend of Pitty Pat isn't known. Perhaps there are a lot of things going on in Pitty Pat Hollow, and the sheer worry about Pitty Pat itself has people's senses so alert that they are picking up on any and every paranormal thing that they come across. By the mid-1900s, there was no more question in the locals' minds as to whether the stories were true or not. Even if some of the accounts were simply lies to keep the legend going, there was enough of them that some truth had to have made its way through the cracks. Pitty Pat Hollow today has become a hotspot for local paranormal researchers and thrill seekers, trying to figure out what Pitty Pat exactly is. But from what I can tell, people are still as divided on that as they have been since the 1800s. Sightings and accounts still persist today, eerily similar to how they have always been. The most common report being hearing the Pitty Pat sound in the woods around you or on the road behind you, but when you turn to look, there's nothing there. Other reports even have so-called Pitty Pat hunters experience some sort of attachment to them afterwards, having a haunting follow them home, then plagued with paranormal activity ever since. Things like hearing voices in their homes, cabinet doors opening and closing on their own, things that didn't exist in the home before trying to find the legendary Pitty Pat. There are reports of people in cars hearing a horrible crash, like they hit some kind of animal in the road, or reminiscent of the stories of Pitty Pat dropping from the trees onto their vehicle, perhaps. But when the driver stops to see what had happened, there is no evidence of any sort of impact on their vehicle at all, and no remains on the roadway of anything being hit. There is also a cemetery said to be just off Shipley Hollow Road, that some people point to the reason behind the strange hauntings of Pitty Pat Hollow. There is even a story of a woman being kidnapped and thrown down an abandoned well, although no records of the event exist to give us any type of time frame. Me personally, I tend to lean toward Pitty Pat being a paranormal shadow figure type entity rather than some sort of unknown cryptid. But this is Appalachia we're talking about here. Those hills are full of mysterious creatures and a good number of cryptids. Another unknown one added to the mix isn't outside the realm of possibilities. That would give the impression that there are more than one, a breeding population existing for generations, and I find myself trying to decide which is more scary. What can be found as fact in the area of Sail Creek today, though, are that locals still avoid Shipley Hollow Road at dark, and they make sure to finish their outside work well before the sun sets each day. I get it though. I get a good amount of viewers that scoff at the idea of hauntings and monsters lingering out there in the dark. That's still not to say you shouldn't be scared of those remote hills. A recent report from 2010 has a group of teenagers venturing out to the remote cemetery in an effort to find Pitty Pat for themselves, only to find themselves being held at gunpoint by local mountain folk until the local authorities could arrive. You know, I've found myself in similar situations before. You don't want to find yourself on the barrel end of a gun being held by angry locals that just flat out don't want you there. Trust me, that'll get your paranoia racing just as quick as the sound of Pitty Pat sneaking up behind you. Creature and ghost hunting has all kinds of dangers involved, some that you may not even think of. Still though, I think I'd rather deal with gun-toting locals than some type of paranormal attachment following me home. That's something I was always fortunate enough to avoid in my younger days, and now I'm content with no longer pushing my luck with that.